workers, companies, the small income, the middle classes on both sides of the Atlantic. And we know how quickly tariffs can affect essential transatlantic supply chains. We do not believe that this is good business, and we want to avoid a global race to the bottom. But as I've already made clear, unjustified tariffs on the European Union will not go unanswered. And let me speak plainly. We are one of the world's largest markets. We will use our tools to safeguard our economic security and interests, and we will protect our workers, our businesses and consumers at every turn. Of course, we're ready to find agreements that work for all, to work together to make each other more prosperous and more secure. Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of this is, of course, defense and the security of Ukraine, of our continent, and of the wider world. In this room, we all feel it, what's at stake. This is a moment in history. Great challenges loom. There has been a lot of talk in the last few days, but it is always instructive to look beyond the words and to recognize that we are just at the beginning of this process. Let's take stock of the starting positions. Contrast the approach taken by President Zelensky and that of President Putin. In the most difficult of circumstances, President Zelensky is prepared to work towards a peace that honors the sacrifice of his country and his fallen compatriots. As Volodymyr Zelensky said from the start, Ukraine wants peace more than anyone else. One that is just and lasting, so that the horrors of the last 3 years are not revisited ever again. On the other hand, President Putin says he's willing to meet, but on what terms? It is up to him to demonstrate that his interest is not to prolong this war. It is up to him to show that he has given up his ambition to destroy Ukraine. And let me be very clear. A failed Ukraine would weaken Europe, but it would also weaken the United States. It would intensify the challenges in the Indo-Pacific and threaten our shared interests. Because what we have seen is the authoritarians of this world are carefully watching whether there's any impunity if you invade your neighbor and violate international borders, or whether there are real deterrents. They are watching us very carefully, what actions we choose to take. And this is why it is so important that we get this right. Ukraine needs peace through strength. Europe wants peace through strength. And President Trump has made clear the United States is firmly committed to peace through strength. So I believe that by working together, we can deliver that just and lasting peace. And there is a lot that Europe already has brought to the table. Historic amounts, actually. Financially and militarily, the overall support amounts to 134 billion euros. That is an equivalent of $140 billion. That is more than anybody else has contributed. This includes $52 billion of military assistance, on par with the United States. We have put in place hard-hitting sanctions, substantially weakening Russia's economy. We have broken one taboo after another and smashed our reliance on Russian gas, making us more resilient permanently. And we are about to do more. We are working with Ukraine on their EU accession, because Ukraine is part of our European family, and this is where their future lies, here in Europe. And ladies and gentlemen, this leads me to the discussions we have had in Europe over the course of the last few weeks. Many in the security circles in Europe were confused, some even worried, by the comments made by a senior US official earlier this week. But we need to be honest here, and we need to avoid outrage and outcry, because if we listen to the substance of the remarks, we not only understand where they are coming from, but recognize there are some remarks we can agree on. Because yes, both the United States and the European Union want an end to the bloodshed. We want a just and lasting peace, one that leads to a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine. And Ukraine should be given solid security guarantees. But perhaps what resonates with me the most is the need for Europe not only to speak frankly, but also to act accordingly. So let there be no room for any doubt. I believe when it comes to European security, Europe has to do more. Europe must bring more to the table. And to achieve this, we need a surge in European defense spending. Currently, the EU27 are spending around 2% of GDP on defense. And yes, our defense spending went up from just over 200 billion before the war to now over 320 billion last year. But we will need to increase that number considerably once again, because from just below 2% to above 3% will mean hundreds of billions of euro of more investment every year. So we need a bold approach. Let's take one step back. In previous extraordinary crises, look at what we did. We empowered member states with extra fiscal room by activating the escape clause. In simple terms, we empowered member states to substantially increase public investments linked to the crisis. I believe we are now in another period of crisis which warrants a similar approach. And this is why I can announce that I will propose to activate the escape clause for defense investments. This will allow member states to substantially increase their defense expenditure. Of course, we will have to do this in a controlled and conditional way. And I will also propose a wider package of tailor-made tools to address the specific situation of each and every one of our member states, from their current levels of defense spending to their fiscal situation. Second, for a massive defense package, we also need a European approach in setting our investment priorities. This will allow the investments in much-needed defense projects of common European interest. And thirdly, we will step up our work to accelerate the accession process of Ukraine to the European Union. We have made significant progress already, but again, now is the time to move mountains in the European Union. Increase the spending possibility of the national budgets, have common European funding for projects of common European interest, and accelerate the accession process of Ukraine. This must be the goal of the new Europe that is working for these goals intensively. My message is, you see Europe adapting, you see Europe stepping up, you see Europe making a difference immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, what is being discussed here today is ultimately about us, our prosperity, our economy, our security, our ability to make good on Europe's enduring promise of peace. Our values do not change. They are universal. But because the world is changing, we have to adapt the way we act. We need a Europe that is more pragmatic, more focused, more determined, one that will counter its threats, one that will leverage its enormous strength and power, and one that is standing by Ukraine and its partners. And there's a lot that this Europe can do, and it will rise to the moment. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yalda Hakim, and I'll be moderating a brief 5-minute session here with the President. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and we have the Vice President also waiting, but I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. You made a very consequential speech there. For several years in Munich, leaders have said it's time to get serious about European defense. Will it be different this time?
Absolutely, because it is in our own interest, and we have the experience of now almost 3 years of an atrocious Russian war in Ukraine, basically at our borders. And this is only one of the challenges we see. So it's absolutely clear, and it is this mentality of urgency that I was asking for, that we have to develop and therefore step up defense. We have for too long, I mean the last 2 decades, kind of outsourced defense and security or underinvested in it. And now we see that there's an enormous gap that we have to close. And therefore, us together as Europeans, we have to step up and we have to make these investments, because it's for our security that we are doing this and where that it is necessary.
What do you think that should be? I mean, do you agree with President Trump that it should be 5%?
Look, for us it's important that we close our capability gaps, and there's a process in NATO that has defined what the capability gaps are. So spending must increase without any question, but important is that we get the right capabilities for the investment that we are doing, and therefore filling these investment gaps, this must be our goal, as rapid as possible, with the norms and standards of NATO, because for me it's very important that we are absolutely complementary with NATO. We need each other. And therefore, I propose to flexibilize the possibility of the member states what their investment in defense is concerned, even if they have fiscal constraints. With this escape clause, this opens the door for targetedly investing more in defense. So this is individual for each member state. Then we have to look at big projects of common European interest, like advanced air defense, for example, which no member state can do on its own, but we need it all together. Then there's a point I have not mentioned here, but this is speaking with our banks, the promotional banks, like the European Investment Bank, that used to not invest in defense, now is changing their lending practices. And of course, we have also to speak with our big private banks that were hiding behind the EIB for too long. also to modernize and adapt their lending practices.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but Ukraine clearly wants and needs security guarantees in any peace negotiation. Is Europe capable of providing them without the US, even if that is not the preference?
So I think for European, as it is not for me to discuss in detail the security guarantees with the United States, because this is a NATO matter. But I think we have to convince all of us that this is a matter of providing security guarantees by countries from the European Union.
Including troops on the ground?
But listen, this really is the competence of the member states. This is certainly not me making them or proposing them how they have to act with their troops. They have the complete competence of their troops. But I think in general, if you look at any kind of security matters concerning Europe and NATO, we all need each other. In other words, the backing of the United States is needed as the European Union, but also the UK or Canada, for example, to take others, Norway, are also needed in the concert of supporting each other.
Will Europe be at the negotiating table?
Absolutely, because Ukraine needs a just and lasting peace. If we want to achieve this goal, and it's very important that we have a true peace, because as I said, others are watching, whether we stick to our principles or whether we give up, then this is only possible with the European Union standing by Ukraine, because one of the components you just mentioned is security guarantees. Another component is the accession process of Ukraine to the European Union, preconditions to have a just and lasting peace. Therefore, the answer is given by itself.
President von der Leyen, thank you so much for your time.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. It is now my honor and pleasure to welcome the Vice President of the United States, Mr. J.D. Vance, who was here last year as Senator, and we are very happy that he has come back to Munich, and we are very much looking forward to his speech. Please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all the gathered delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the hosts of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator. I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree. Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when people represent, when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests, hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger. But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we are defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important? And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making. If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you. Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates produce unstable results? But there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America. You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy to adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk. But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree. And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that, to me, is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
Okay.
All right, thank you all. I know that was a little bit hectic, and I appreciate your flexibility throughout the course of the day. We're all rolling with the punches. It's going to be great, yeah. It's going to be so good. It's so good. It's going to be so good. It's so good. You guys make me scream at my 7-foot-tall German police officer when I went to pick up my credential because I had my State Department CAT card, my White House hard pass, and my driver's license. Acceptable because I needed a passport. And I said, and they said, you can't get this without a passport. He goes, understand, this is not the United States. We are in Germany. Germany is in Europe. Do you know this? Do you know that Germany is in Germany? Do you know that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've
had like 18
strokes. Just going to tell them that
we're in a issue in Marlow. Mr. Secretary, who in Europe should be involved in Russia-Ukraine negotiations, and when should they join? Thank you, Press.
Thank you. Thank you. Je vais bousculer un peu les... Cliquer. Bien, merci d'être nombreux. Je le disais ce matin, mon déplacement ici à Grenoble était prévu depuis de nombreuses semaines. Il y a eu cette actualité qui, en fait, a éclairé d'un jour un peu nouveau mon déplacement. Mais l'objectif du déplacement, c'était de présenter une nouvelle stratégie pour lutter contre la criminalité organisée, pour lutter contre le narcotrafic. Je veux simplement rappeler des éléments de constat. Et ces éléments, ils sont absolument affolants. Ils sont affolants parce que, d'abord, c'est une déferlante, notamment de drogue. Aujourd'hui, un tsunami blanc même, cette expression a pu être lancée dans le débat public, de même que la commission d'enquête du Sénat avait parlé, là encore, d'une submersion. Et vraiment, on a vu que les saisies de cocaïne avaient plus que quintuplé, pratiquement décuplé en l'espace de 10 ans. Je veux simplement vous redire un chiffre qui apparaît peu souvent dans le débat public, mais nos forces de l'ordre, auxquelles je veux associer la douane, sont totalement mobilisées, puisque en 2023, en termes de cocaïne, la saisie, c'était 23 tonnes. Un an plus tard, la saisie, sur 11 mois, c'est 47 tonnes. Or, le prix semble ne pas bouger, alors qu'on n'a plus que doublé les saisies. Si le prix ne bouge pas, ça veut dire qu'il n'y a pas de rareté. Ça veut dire qu'il y a toujours plus d'arrivées, ce qui montre en réalité la situation dramatique actuelle. Deuxième élément, désormais les drogues les plus dures, je dis bien les plus dures, sont disponibles partout, tout le temps. Partout, tout le temps. Hier, on pensait que c'était l'apanage, si j'ose dire, des plus grandes villes, des quartiers, mais aujourd'hui, tous les territoires sont concernés. Quand je dis tous les territoires, bien sûr, les territoires les plus urbains, mais aussi les territoires les plus ruraux. Les drogues sont disponibles tout le temps, aussi, puisqu'on a désormais, avec l'Ubersheet, une nouvelle distribution qui permet à des consommateurs de recevoir à domicile de la drogue. Donc ça, c'est un constat général. Ce constat général m'amène aussi à en faire un autre. Je vous l'ai indiqué ce matin, c'est que le narcotrafic, ce sont à la fois des enfants soldats et des enfants victimes. Ce sont des jeunes qui sont recrutés, souvent sur des réseaux sociaux, et qui sont utilisés par les narcotrafiquants comme des tueurs à gages. Ils ont 15 ans, ils ont parfois 14 ans. Souvenez-vous que le père de famille, qui était ce conducteur VTC, père de 3 enfants, avait été pris en otage par un adolescent de 14 ans qui l'a abattu à bout portant parce qu'il refusait d'emmener ce jeune pour un règlement de compte sur un autre lieu. À Rennes, lorsque je m'étais déplacé, c'est un enfant de 5 ans. 2 balles dans la tête, 2 balles dans la tête. Il était à côté de son père, qui était un trafiquant. Il y a eu un règlement de compte, il a pris les 2 balles. À Marseille, ce jeune de 15 ans, lardé de 50 coups de couteau, et ils l'ont achevé en le brûlant vif. La réalité du narcotrafic, de la criminalité organisée, elle est celle-ci. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai totalement assumé, c'est la première fois qu'on le fait en France, ce spot, ce clip, diffusé à la fois sur les écrans de télévision, mais aussi sur les réseaux sociaux, pour responsabiliser et même culpabiliser les consommateurs. Je sais que les addictions nécessitent parfois des soins. Mais ce que je sais aussi, par ailleurs, et je ne suis pas ministre de la Santé, je suis ministre de l'Intérieur, ce que je sais, c'est que s'il n'y avait pas de consommateurs, il n'y aurait pas de trafiquants, que s'il n'y avait pas de demande, il n'y aurait pas d'offres. Ce spot a été par ailleurs, comme vous le savez, financé par l'argent de la drogue, par les saisies des biens confisqués des narcotrafiquants. Et dernier point de constat, c'est aujourd'hui une menace existentielle. C'est une menace existentielle, le narcotrafic, la criminalité organisée, parce qu'elle a atteint une telle puissance financière que désormais, elle est capable de corrompre. De corrompre aussi bien dans le secteur privé que dans le secteur public. Et donc, il faut une réaction. C'est ce que nous avons proposé avec les parlementaires et notamment avec la commission d'enquête du Sénat, que j'avais, quand j'étais président du groupe au Sénat, diligenté sur le droit de tirage que chaque groupe parlementaire a à chaque début de session. Et cette commission d'enquête a débouché. Elle était transpartisane. Les conclusions ont été adoptées à l'unanimité. Elle débouche sur un texte de loi, une proposition de loi qui a été votée par l'ensemble des sénateurs à l'unanimité. C'est si rare aujourd'hui, si rare alors que bien souvent le milieu politique est profondément divisé, mais les sénateurs ont été capables, je pense et j'en suis même sûr, de surmonter, de dépasser leurs divergences, leurs appartenances partisanes, et en quelque sorte, ils ont donné une première victoire à la République. Je suis certain, c'est ce que j'ai dit ce matin sur la place Saint-Bruno, que l'idée qui doit nous guider, c'est de faire du combat contre le narcotrafic et la criminalité organisée la même chose que ce que nous avons fait pour le combat contre le terrorisme, avec des résultats. Et nous le pouvons. Ça mettra du temps. Je ne peux pas m'engager sur le terme, mais cette victoire, nous l'obtiendrons. J'en suis absolument certain. Alors précisément pour l'obtenir, il y a une double lame, si j'ose dire. Une lame un peu plus lointaine qui va être celle du texte, dès lors que le texte sera définitivement voté par les deux assemblées et qui deviendra une loi. Très rapidement, une nouvelle organisation de l'État, une spécialisation de toute la chaîne judiciaire. Dans le terrorisme, nous avions créé, il y a 10 ans, un parquet national dédié, parquet national antiterroriste. Il y aura un parquet national anticriminalité organisée, un PNACO, y compris jusqu'à des cours qui seront spécifiques. Il est hors de question de faire juger des narcotrafiquants par des jurys populaires. qui pourraient être sous la menace, justement, de mort de ces mafias. Et de même, d'ailleurs, sur les juges d'application des peines. Toute la filière judiciaire sera spécialisée. Il en va de même, pour ce qui me concerne, mon ministère, avec un état-major, tout comme il y a un état-major permanent sur le terrorisme, c'est-à-dire dans un même lieu, où on réunit, dans le même lieu, donc, les services de renseignement et les services d'enquête, pour permettre aux uns et aux autres, justement, de se parler et de travailler ensemble. Des services qui dépendent du ministère de l'Intérieur, des services qui peuvent parfois dépendre des armées, des services qui peuvent dépendre aussi de Bercy. On a vu tout à l'heure la DGFIP, on a vu par exemple la douane, etc., etc. Donc ça, ce sera fondamental avec des nouveaux pouvoirs confiés au préfet, avec aussi des dispositifs anti-corruption, mais aussi anti-blanchiment. Ça, c'est l'horizon de quelques mois, mais ce sera très important parce qu'on va totalement refonder notre politique et notre action contre le narcotrafic et la criminalité organisée. Ça, c'est une première lame. L'autre lame, celle que je voulais vous présenter aujourd'hui, c'est une nouvelle doctrine, une nouvelle stratégie, parce qu'on n'a pas le temps d'attendre, parce que le texte de loi, d'ailleurs, ne sera pas du tout antinomique, on l'anticipe en quelque sorte dans le cadre juridique actuel, à droit constant, et cette nouvelle approche, en réalité, c'est à la fois une approche qui sera une approche judiciaire, de long terme, sur la durée, une approche qui sera aussi sécuritaire, sur la voie publique notamment, et enfin, une approche qui sera une approche beaucoup plus administrative. D'abord, l'approche judiciaire. L'idée, c'est de démanteler durablement les filières. Un coup de pied dans la fourmilière, très bien, mais surtout un coup de filet. L'idée, c'est d'avoir un travail en amont, notamment un travail de renseignement pour cibler les individus dangereux, pour connaître les filières et préparer entre les forces de sécurité intérieure, sous l'autorité d'ailleurs du judiciaire, la judiciarisation de ces individus qui, lorsqu'on déclenchera des actions, seront bien entendu interpellés pour être remis à la justice. Ça, c'est un travail dans la durée, mais vous voyez bien que c'est un travail qui nécessite beaucoup de renseignements, qui nécessite beaucoup de méticulosité, mais en fait, c'est ce qui nous permettra demain de démanteler durablement des filières. Et ça, c'est un travail qui est absolument capital et qui associera l'ensemble des services de renseignement, notamment de l'État, que ce soit les renseignements territoriaux, que ce soit la DGCI, que ce soit le Cirasco, les douanes pour Bercy, etc., etc. Donc ça, c'est une première réponse, qui est la réponse judiciaire, une approche sur la durée pour avoir un maximum d'effets et ébranler totalement l'édifice construit par ces narcotrafiquants, par la criminalité organisée. Deuxième dimension, qui est une dimension plus sécuritaire, avec notamment les forces de l'ordre, gendarmerie et puis police. Et là, il s'agit de reprendre le contrôle de l'espace public. Et quand je parle d'espace public, c'est l'ensemble de l'espace public. Bien sûr sur la voirie, bien sûr dans les transports, bien sûr, par exemple, dans les halls d'immeubles, mais aussi avec des fouilles dans les parties communes, des fouilles dans les caves, pour chercher de la drogue, pour chercher des produits de contrebande, des cigarettes de contrebande, pour chercher des armes. L'ensemble, alors sur réquisition bien sûr du parquet, on le fait dans ce cadre juridique particulier, chercher bien entendu aussi des munitions et des billets, mais on fera ce contrôle, on reprendra possession de façon implacable de l'ensemble de l'espace public, là encore voirie, les immeubles et bien sûr aussi tout ce qui concerne les transports en commun et les voitures, avec des fouilles et avec des contrôles routiers. On utilisera toutes les techniques, y compris les plus modernes, y compris les drones. On a eu ce matin une démonstration. Il ne faut pas s'en priver pour qu'on puisse lutter à armes égales avec la criminalité organisée. Sur cet aspect sécuritaire, à chaque fois, là encore, on essaiera de travailler et on fera ce travail entre la police, donc par exemple dans une ville, on est en zone police, et autour, on est en zone de gendarmerie. Et souvent, un certain nombre de délinquants près de la poutre d'escampette et partent en zone gendarmerie. Eh bien, quand on fera des opérations de police, on associera la police nationale, la gendarmerie nationale, qui tendra un certain nombre de pièges tout autour, une sorte d'encerclement pour faire des contrôles, et là aussi, avec cette collaboration étroite entre les deux grandes forces de sécurité intérieure, pour maximiser nos chances et pour faire en sorte qu'on ait des résultats en matière d'interpellation. Donc cette coordination entre les services de renseignement, entre les services de sécurité, entre les services de sécurité et aussi le judiciaire, c'est la clé du succès. Et puis, je parlais d'une réponse judiciaire, une réponse sécuritaire, il y a la réponse administrative. Parce qu'on a des outils. On a des outils. Le texte voté au Sénat va nous donner de nouveaux outils, vous le savez, mais déjà, on a un certain nombre d'outils qu'on doit pouvoir mobiliser avec l'interministérialité. Voilà. Bien sûr, le ministère de l'Intérieur, la Justice, Bercy et bien d'autres. On a vu tout à l'heure, d'ailleurs, dans le contrôle des commerces, la direction des services vétérinaires. Là encore, l'idée, c'est qu'on ait cette palette d'instruments administratifs. Et la grande idée, il y a deux idées en fait. C'est qu'on démantèle l'écosystème économique donc de la drogue, des trafics, et qu'on traque en même temps l'argent mal acquis, le blanchiment, etc. C'est à cela que ça sert. On a des outils qu'il faut utiliser, qui sont très performants. On a parlé ce matin, par exemple, du CODAF, qui est le comité départemental antifraude. C'est grâce à une réunion du CODAF, les CODAF se réunissent en tant que de besoin, sous la double responsabilité, sous la double présidence de la préfète, enfin des préfets et des procureurs de la République. Et vous avez dans le tour de table de 5 à 10 services de l'État pour essayer vraiment de cribler, mais de passer à un tamis très très fin, notamment des commerces. On l'a vu tout à l'heure dans la place Saint-Bruno, il y a eu des CODAF qui ont été tenus. Le CODAF, d'ailleurs, lorsque on s'est rencontrés tout à l'heure devant le bar associatif qui avait donné lieu au lancer de grenade, un CODAF, récemment, avait détecté des trafics. Et il y avait une procédure de fermeture de ce bar associatif. Ça sert à ça. Ce matin, on sait très très bien qu'autour de cette place Saint-Bruno, il y a des commerces qui peuvent être engagés dans le blanchiment. Voilà, et donc pour que ces commerces-là puissent être stoppés, il faut des preuves, il faut donc qu'on associe pas seulement les forces de police ou de gendarmerie, mais qu'on associe la DGFIP, la Direction générale des finances publiques, départementales, les douanes, etc., pour nous donner des preuves. Et à partir des preuves, la préfecture peut fermer des commerces. On peut engager un certain nombre de pistes de travail et de procédures, y compris d'ailleurs, et ça c'est très important, ce que nous ferons de plus en plus, des enquêtes patrimoniales pour voir si des biens qui sont mal acquis ne peuvent pas être dans un premier temps saisis et ensuite confisqués. Mais la confiscation, c'est l'aspect ensuite judiciaire. Donc c'est vraiment la destruction de ces écosystèmes passera par tous les instruments de l'État, y compris, je le dis, une large utilisation de la police des étrangers, parce qu'on sait parfaitement que dans un certain nombre de ces commerces, il y a du travail illicite, il y a du travail clandestin, il y a des filières, et ce que je veux dire, c'est que dans les interpellations de la police, par exemple, dans l'espace sur lequel nous sommes allés ce matin, la place Saint-Bruno, 41% de ces interpellations de la délinquance concernent des étrangers. Donc c'est aussi la police des étrangers que nous allons mobiliser. C'est vraiment l'ensemble des instruments et de leviers à l'État que nous allons mobiliser pour pouvoir avoir des résultats, parce que nous voulons déposséder les trafiquants de leur patrimoine, et ça je pense que c'est quelque chose de fondamental. Voilà ce que je voulais vous présenter. Vous voyez que c'est une stratégie intégrale, c'est une approche qui est globale. Il n'y a pas une mesure qui soit la panacée, il n'y a pas de miracle, mais si on avance de façon obstinée, très combative, mais très méthodique, en alignant tout ce dont l'espace, en tout cas toutes les armes dont l'État dispose, alors nous aurons des résultats. Et nous allons commencer. J'ai une vingtaine de villes qui sont les plus concernées, comme Grenoble et d'autres en France, et cette méthode, nous allons l'appliquer partout en France. Elle donnera lieu un certain nombre de moyens, y compris en termes de forces de sécurité, qui pourront être, je vous l'ai indiqué ce matin, il y a une vingtaine d'enquêteurs qui enquêtent sur le café associatif, 10 enquêteurs du cru d'ici, locaux, s'ajoutent d'autres enquêteurs de Lyon et des enquêteurs de notre unité centrale nationale. On a aussi un certain nombre d'offices centraux auprès de la gendarmerie nationale, auprès de la police nationale. C'est donc tout cet éventail de moyens que nous allons mobiliser avec un objectif et avec une priorité, c'est lutter contre la criminalité organisée. Je suis prêt à répondre à vos questions. L'opération Place Nette visait à donner un coup de poing et c'est très utile.
还提出了一个重大的理念，那就是我们各国一起共同构建人类命运共同体，这是一个宏伟的目标。那么，我们希望各国都能够超越历史文化、社会制度、意识形态的这种不同，我们以同舟共济的精神，共同来呵护好我们这个唯一人类可以居住的星球，我们共同来建设好命运与共的地球村。这既是我们中国、我们共产党的国际主义的一种情怀，也是体现了天下为公这一中华民族的优秀的文化的传统，已经得到了越来越多国家的理解、认同和支持。而中国，我们将会继续为践行好这些重要的理念来做出我们的努力和贡献。谢谢。
Thank you. One of the topics here since 22 has been Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At the MSC, just a few days before Russia's invasion, you stated, and I quote, "The sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of any country should be respected and safeguarded because it is a basic norm of international relations. Ukraine is no exception." So you confirmed the Charter of the United Nations. Now, today, Russia has become what John McCain once said here at the Munich Security Conference, China's gas station. I would add it's a gas station with an army. This means you have a lot of influence on Ukraine. Do you see a possibility now that there is more pressure and finally more pressure to finish this war, that from your end you could maybe do something on your side of the gas station and maybe cut the possibility of Russia to supply gas to your country, or lower the price, or stop some of the dual-use goods that are coming there so that there is more pressure on Russia to finally finish this war?
中国和俄罗斯，我们是两大邻国，有着漫长的边界。两国关系过去经历过一番曲折的经历，之后我们双方吸取教训，我们建立了不结盟、不对抗、不针对第三方的那么睦邻友好关系。进而我们增进了我们的战略互信，建立了全面战略伙伴关系。中国同俄罗斯之间的交往是正常的国与国之间的交往。刚才提到，中国可不可以不从俄罗斯买油气了？我想问一句：如果中国不从俄罗斯买，哪个国家能够提供如此巨量的油气来满足中国民众的需求呢？那是不可能的，也是不保险的，因为常常有的国家把经贸问题政治化，当作打压中国的工具。我们不会允许出现这样的情况，我们要为我们的人民 负责任。但是，中国在对待地区热点问题上是有我们的立场的。我们历来主张，一切争端和冲突都应该通过对话寻求政治解决，因为武力和制裁不可能真正和彻底的解决问题。乌克兰问题上同样如此。从这场危机爆发的第2天开始，就是2022年2月25号，中方就提出了对话协商解决。习近平主席提出的4点主张是中国立场的最权威的阐释，那就是各国的主权、领土完整应该得到尊重，联合国的宪章应该得到遵守，各国的合理安全关切应该得到重视，一切致力于和平的努力都应该得到支持。我们就是以此为遵循，在不断地推进我们的劝和促谈，哪怕哪有一点希望，我们就要做出我们的100倍的努力。我们派出的特使去各国斡旋，我们同巴西等南方国家发起了和平之友。那么中国的这些立场，现在看随着时间的推移，应该说是公正的、客观的，也是理性的、务实的，体现了国际社会的最大的共识。任何冲突的终点都是谈判桌，历史最终一定是公正的。中方乐见一切致力于和平的努力，包括这2天美国同俄罗斯达成的共识。同时，我们认为所有当事方，包括利益攸关方，都应该适时地参与到这个和谈的进程当中。这场战事发生在欧洲大地上，欧洲更有必要为此发挥重要的作用，共同来解决好危机的根源性的因素，共同来探讨欧洲的长治久安，找到大家都能够接受的均衡有效可持续的欧洲的安全的框架。谢谢。
Thank you. We have run out of time, but I would at least very briefly ask you to give us a sneak preview of how you think the relationship between US and China will develop.
这是一个大家都关心的问题。我要在这里首先告诉大家的是，中国的对美政策保持着连续性和稳定性，我们不会轻易的翻烙饼。这体现了作为大国的战略定力和国际信誉。我们的对美政策就是习近平主席提出的3原则：相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢。中国和美国，我们制度确实不一样，这是我们各自人民做出的选择。如果想改造或者颠覆对方的话，那是不切实际的。正确的态度就是相互尊重，这是中美交往的一个前提。和平共处更是理所当然。中美2个大国总不能冲突起来吧？因为那将殃及整个世界。所以还是要开展对话，加强交往，增进了解，建立信任。合作共赢，这是因为国际社会期待中美开展合作。全球性的挑战也需要中美携手来应对。当然，这也是中美2个大国应当承担的国际责任。中方已经准备好了，我们愿意按照3原则，同美方构建 稳定、健康、可持续的双边关系，找到两个大国在这个星球上的正确相处之道。我们当然希望美方能够相向而行，但是如果美方不愿意，如果美方仍然还要对中国打压和遏制，那我们也别无选择，我们必将奉陪到底，我们必将坚定地维护中国的主权、中国的国家的尊严和我们的正当发展权利，必将坚决地回击美方的单极和霸凌的这种行径。中国这样做啊，也是为了维护国际的公平正义，为了维护国际关系的基本准则。中国人从来不信邪，不怕鬼。新中国就是在战胜各种艰难险阻中发展壮大起来的。中国有句古话叫做“天行健，君子自强不息”。中国还有一句话说得很形象，那就是“他强任他强，清风拂山岗；他横任他横，明月照大江。任尔东西南北风，我自泰然处之，岿然不动。”这几句话可能翻译起来不容易，可能又会出来很多翻译的版本，大家可以相互切磋，也可以找 DeepSeek 来帮一帮忙。总之，我们对这个世界的前途是充满信心的。同样，我们对中美关系的未来也是充满信心的。中美两国只有一个我们共同努力的方向，那就是刚才我反复谈到的相互尊重、和平共处、合作共赢，这也是国际社会最大的期待。谢谢。
Well, thank you very much also for this proverb. We see if we have ChatGPT or so translating it, but I thought the English translation we got was pretty good. Thank you for being here. I sincerely hope also you can use the possibility of Munich to meet with representatives of the new U.S. administration. It would be very good that what you are also proposing, more talks and discussion on these issues, would materialize here in Munich. I wish you again good luck on your trip to New York, and thank you for being such a good guest here to the Munich Security Conference. Thank you for this. All the best.
Well, thank you.
Дякую всіх, дуже дякую, що приєдналися на цю панель, яка буде посвячена майбутнє співробітництва США і України. Дуже дякуємо президента, також представників Сенату США, головний член комітету Сенату з питань навколишнього середовища, також з питань бюджету і з міжнародних відносин, член спеціального комітету з розвідки. Також всі вони представляють Конгрес США і президента Зеленський. Допоможіть нам розібратися з цим, що це таке за угода мирна, яку пропонує президент Трамп. Тільки що ми вислухали Венса. Що для вас означає ця згода? Будь ласка, що значить мир для України? Я тільки що слухав, що це не згода щодо безпеки, це такий документ, який добре. Що ви знаєте, як ви розумієте, що це значить? Що я знаю, я президент України, якщо я щось підписую, то я все знаю, що я підписую. Це дуже добре початок, так. Початок добре. Я детально перейду на українську, щоб краще відповісти на ваше запитання. Це щоб не зробити помилок, так? Якісь деталі, це дуже важливо, бо це дуже важливо і це необхідно.
Тобто сьогодні не йдеться про мирну угоду. І не треба шукати Путіна. Нам потрібна тверда підтримка сильної країни, Сполучені Штати, сильного президента Трампа. Нам потрібна його підтримка і бути на нашому боці. Я не вважаю, що може бути щось між нами посередині, бо не дві країни воюють одна з одною, а Росія принесла війну на нашу землю, і ми її, я вважаю, гідно захищаємо. Мирна угода не може бути підписана в Мюнхені, тому що це Мюнхен. І тут немає президента. І тут ми пам'ятаємо, які речі були підписані колись. Так. І я таких речей не повторюю. І тому дуже важливо зрозуміти, мирна угода може бути тільки план про закінчення війни, який передусім повинен бути проговорений і підтриманий між Україною, президентом, і Сполученими Штатами, виключно президентом. Також обов'язково треба важлива роль для країн Європи, тому що ми говоримо про гарантії безпеки як головний момент в будь-якому документі про припинення війни або закінчення війни, гарантії безпеки для України, для всієї Європи. І Україна є частиною вже Європи і буде частиною рівноправною Європейського Союзу. І для нас голос Європи дуже важливий за столом, а не десь за лаштунками. Вони рівноправні партнери. Це можна подивитись через той вклад грошовий і військовий, гуманітарний, різний, фінансовий, який Європа вкладала разом з нашими друзями Сполучених Штатів Америки. У нас була велика бесіда, довга бесіда. Я подякував двопартійній підтримці, дякуємо сенаторам, конгресменам, людям Сполучених Штатів Америки. І я дуже вдячний людям Європи за те, що всі ці люди, суспільство передусім, підтримали життя українського суспільства. Ось про що йдеться. Що стосується моєї зустрічі з американськими колегами, у нас багато зустрічей, я цьому дуже радий. У нас була хороша розмова з президентом Трампом, і ми отримали пропозиції щодо інвестування в critical minerals України, і ми про це багато говорили. Я говорив, що треба захищати Україну, наші ресурси. Чому їх треба захищати? якщо ми говоримо прагматично, а не тільки про безпеку Європи, хоча я вважаю, що безпека Європи передусім, і люди – це пріоритет, але говорити можна і фінансово, прагматично. Коли ми говоримо про захист наших ресурсів, щоб вони не попали в руки повністю окупаційній Росії і також їх союзникам, треба все це захищати. А якщо країни їх це захищають, це дуже важливо, коротше треба. I'll be short. Okay, it's difficult to be short, sorry.
Не просто бути коротко казати, бо це дуже важливо пояснити всі ці деталі. Таким чином, ці мінерали, ці країни, ми вдячні за підтримку цієї країни, які будуть це нам допомагати захищати. Вони мають пріоритети для того, щоб інвестувати в це. Нам треба робочі місця створювати, і щоб це було також вигідно. Це було дуже важливо, і треба зберегти і не віддавати ні Північній Кореї, ні Китаю, ні знаю з ким Росія після окупації, після дезокупації, кому вони це передадуть. Це мій меседж. Я дуже щаслив, що американці це підтримали, і що міністр фінансів США приїхав до Києва, це його місія, була дуже вдячний йому, і він привіз документи, цей документ був на моїй столі, я доручив моїм юристам вивчити і дати їх консультації щодо можливих змін. І таким це документ, що не щодо безпеки, а щодо інвестицій меморандум між двома сторонами. І я знаю, що буду також зустрічатися з віце-президентом. Не знаю, чи сьогодні, може вечором, але я тут таким чином можемо чи вечір, чи або завтра. Як президент Трамп сказав, можете куди хочеш, я завжди в Вашингтоні, приїжджай куди хочеш. Я віце-президент також можу сказати, також я тут, можемо зустрітися, коли ви хочете. Я кажу віце-президенту Америки. Це задоволений, я готовий зустрічатися. Не всі готові підписати, але зустрічати.
They will sign right memo how to save critical minerals and etc. If it will be if it will be ready, I hope it will be ready. That's all.
President, does the conversation between Vladimir Putin and President Trump risk embolden Putin? Right. So how do you view this specifically? Are there risks and dangers for the U.S.?
Risk? What is it?
Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have spoken on the phone. You were briefed on the conversation. Is this a risk for yourself, of course, but also the U.S.?
Phone calls between Putin and Trump was risk for United States? I think not risk for United States. I think for Trump, because he's stronger than Putin, I think so. I think risks for all the world. Because the priorities, we have much more risks than risk for the United States, with all respect, for all of us, with all the big guys. And I think it's very necessary. As I said at the very beginning, I had good conversation with the President Trump. We had some phone calls, and he had phone call with Putin, and he said to me, I think that that he wants to stop the war. I said to him that he is a liar, and you can count on it. I hope that you will pressure him, because I don't trust him. We had such conversations with Putin, direct conversation about ceasefire. So just ceasefire, we don't need just ceasefire. This is global problem. So we had ceasefire. It was my direct decision. And we made a decision that it will be ceasefire and exchange all the prisoners. And he didn't change all the prisoners yet. We've been very happy. That was first step when we brought home more than 100 guys to their family. It was very necessary between us. Even because of this one reason, I had to come to France in 2019 and bring back people. But he will not just, ceasefire and that's all. That's why I said to President, yes, but I think phone calls are phone calls. Let's forget about it. I think what is very important, the meeting not to make any decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. This is principal position we will never accept it. And when I said that we will never accept, I'm not speaking just about me. I'm speaking about all our people, all our nation. People will not stop. We will give him pause. Without real security guarantees, we will give him pause. I don't want to, be those person in the history who helped Putin to occupy my country. I don't want it. And that's why I will never do it. I will never do it. And it's very important for me to pressure Putin, put all the sanctions. I think President Trump is ready to do it. He has all this power to do it. That's why I wanted very much to come to Washington any day this century. And to come to Washington, and I think we need very much to make the common plan of civilized people and to share all these things with our friends and with the help of our friends of Europe. It's very necessary not to lose this unity. I'm so proud that we are part of such strong Europe. And I think this is important, very important, not to lose this unity. Before this war, maybe not too much things, by the way, which this war made positively. That unity between the United States and Europe. That's what this war brought. And Putin scared it. I think during the last 20, 25 years, I don't remember how many years he is in Kremlin. So, this is the first time when the unity could pressure him, and he couldn't occupy us because of this unity, because of our people and soldiers, of course, but because of this, not to lose it, and now to make a deal without us or without Europe is not a good idea, and I hope that President Trump doesn't have this idea. I count on it very much. I think I answered on 10 next questions. Sorry.
I have 100 questions, but to the senators.
Yeah,
and maybe
to the senators, please.
To the senators, and maybe let's start with Senator Graham. Are you comfortable with a world in which the president seeks to do deals with authoritarian leaders like Putin or even China before consulting with long-standing allies like Germany and France?
Yeah, I'm very okay with Trump talking to Putin. He talked to him. What I'm not okay with is the world losing deterrence. Why are we in this war? Okay, they invade in 2008 Georgia. They invade in 2014. They're back at it again. So rather than worrying about who Trump is calling, why don't we talk a little bit, how the hell this happened? I've been coming to this thing for 25 years. John McCain, every conference, Putin sucks. He's a liar. Oh, no, you got him wrong. Who was here? All the people worried about the phone call, where were you when we needed to stop Putin? Why didn't he invade when Trump was president? Because he was afraid of Trump. That's why he didn't invade. Why did he invade in 2014? Because he could get away with it. Why did he invade again? Because he could get away with it. I want to tell you and your people, you're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass. And I'm very proud to have you as our ally. Now, how does this war end? It ends in a way I hope so we don't do this yet again. Do you all agree with that? So it doesn't matter to me who Trump calls or when he calls. It matters to me how it ends. Afghanistan ended poorly. Do you all agree with that? Well, this will not end poorly. President Trump is not going to do in Ukraine what we did in Afghanistan. He's going to try to find a way to make sure this war ends sooner rather than later. And when I talk to people about at home why it matters, Putin won't stop unless somebody stops him. Well, you're stopping him. But he'll keep going unless we get the conditions right. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think he's going to find a way to end this war in a fashion that Putin would be a fool to do it again. Very quickly. How do you deter Putin? You arm this guy to the teeth. Yeah, you give him a bunch of F-16s, not a few F-16s. You give them ATACMS, you give them tanks, because they will fight. Remind me not to invade Ukraine, okay? It just doesn't work out well. So let's arm this guy. Let's do the minerals agreement so we'll have our American business interests. Putin doesn't understand what's going on. If we sign this minerals agreement, Putin is screwed because Trump will defend the deal. So the best thing that's going to happen here is he's going to do a deal with you, I hope, and he will defend America's interest. So this war is going to come to end, I hope, sooner rather than later, and it's going to come to end in a way where it won't happen again. I have every confidence in the world that Donald Trump will end this war in a way that there will be no third invasion of Ukraine.
Senator, would you rule out NATO membership for Ukraine?
I think NATO is ruling that out, not Donald Trump. I think there are members of NATO who are not going to let this man in. But I've got an idea. It comes from the art of the deal. If we can't agree they should be in NATO like right now, can we agree that if there's ever another invasion, the moment they invade, they go into NATO? Let Putin put them in NATO if he wants to. Think of that. If in 2014, we'd had an agreement where if there was another invasion, they would be in NATO, there would have never been an invasion in 2014. So what do I think? I think we let Putin know that if he ever does this again, they're going into NATO really quick.
Senator Shaheen?
Well, I agree. I don't think we should take NATO off the table. I think it's important for us to have as much leverage for Ukraine as possible going into any kind of a negotiation. So I agree with Senator Graham. We need to give them weapons. I think there's bipartisan support in Congress to do that. I think we need to make sure that NATO membership continues to be on the table. And we need to do everything. And we need to ensure that Ukraine is at the negotiating table, because one of the mistakes in Afghanistan was that the Afghan government was not at the negotiating table when President Trump in his first term negotiated a peace agreement there.
Senator Cornyn?
Well, I think one mistake that Americans make sometimes is to assume that other people are just like them and don't recognize that a unique history and culture may affect the way that people like Vladimir Putin view the world. And it's clear that there's no cost-benefit analysis for Putin here, because he's sacrificing hundreds of thousands of Russians on the battlefield, and now North Koreans dying by the thousands. And Putin doesn't seem to care, and the people of Russia don't seem to be holding him accountable, perhaps because they're only hearing one side of the story. So I think we need to recognize that Putin is driven by a vision of restoring the Russian Empire, and that's why I believe that he won't stop at Ukraine, and that's why it's so important that we must stop him together in Ukraine.
But does a peace deal need to go back to the borders in 2014, the same borders?
I think the peace deal needs to be something that this gentleman right here can sign proudly, and that, first of all, does justice to what happened to Ukraine. Just between Russia and Ukraine, the deal needs to provide that justice for Ukraine. Second, it needs to be structured in such a way that it sends a message that there is no next Ukraine, that Russia does not just move on to another country to play the same script. And the third thing is we need to set it up in such a way that when China is looking at this outcome and they look over at Taiwan, they think, maybe not such a great idea. And there's one thing I feel obliged to add, because we are Codell McCain. We still keep John's name. Partly that's out of affection, but partly it's out of honoring his commitment to hold fast to the Atlantic Alliance. And what I want people here to know is that, at least for the Senate, there is strong majority, super majority, in favor of supporting Ukraine, seeing this through, making sure this does not come off as a win for Putin and embolden him further. And while you will hear, obviously, other voices, there is a strong, strong, big core of people like Dick Blumenthal, who's been in 6 times to Kiev to, battle for this. There is a very strong reservoir of determination in the Senate to see this through, and it is a bipartisan reservoir of determination.
Can I add something? Yeah. Because I think one of the things we haven't talked about, we've talked about the U.S. role, but Europe also has a role. The sanctions that we've put on Russia are a lot stronger if Europe is fully engaged in those sanctions. And Europe has also contributed to ensuring that Ukraine can defend itself. So we've got to remember that it's important for us to act together.
Yeah, and what did we get wrong in 2014? What did we get wrong in 2014? Well, we didn't give Ukraine much weapons at all. We gave you a lot of blankets. So we didn't have the policy of giving you what you need to defend yourself, right? We didn't mention anything about the consequences of another invasion. We didn't seize the moment to integrate our economies by doing mineral deals. Everything we didn't do in 2014, we better do now.
Including going after that shadow fleet that is keeping his money flowing in. That shadow fleet has gotten away with way too much.
But President Zelensky, I mean, what we understood from President Trump is that there'll be no NATO, no U.S. troops, and Trump is happy to carve up land. So again, a reaction to what we've heard this week, and how would you sell it back home? What's been the reaction in Ukraine?
The reaction in Ukraine. The reaction in Ukraine on the battlefield. That's what we have to do, or in all our cities when people just work, try to do business, and not bad, really, and then helps our soldiers. That's the reaction on everything. And of course, when we hear, some not positive messages, of course it has big influence. The worst thing when you have big influence on moral of the people. Because, today I think only such things, love to Ukraine, believing and trusting that we will have just peace and will that we will defend our country, and we are right, and it's fair, absolutely. And I think that's things which really hold us. But about the NATO, I mean that I heard so many times from American side. By the way, Biden's administration and now from President Trump, I heard a lot of messages from them by phone. My first phone call with the President Biden, and my first question, will we be in NATO? He said no. And I said, we will see. And then we had more meetings, more questions, but be very honest, United States, they never saw us in NATO. They just spoke about it. But they really didn't want us in NATO. It's true. I'm not about people, and there are a lot of congressmen, yes, senators. It's true, who've been always in participation with our NATO will, but really on the level of leader of the country, on the level of president, never I heard it, but during my term, I never heard that we will be in NATO. Never. So it's not the question to Trump, to President Trump, with all respect to everybody. That's the question to the policy of the United States or of the White House. This is the policy that Ukraine is not in NATO. But it doesn't mean that we can't change this, because now we see that NATO in Europe consists of strong soldiers, mostly in Ukraine. We are not in NATO, but we really have strong army, which can really make stronger NATO everywhere. And I think this is in both interests, to have Ukraine in NATO, and both interests, in interest of Ukraine and in interest of NATO. And that's why when we speak, and we spoke with the President Biden, and we spoke with the President Trump, and especially now with the President Trump, I asked, so okay, if it's not NATO for today, if it's not NATO, We will ask tomorrow, it doesn't matter. But if we're speaking about today, what alternatives? What do you know the alternatives? I don't know. What I see, if we don't have NATO, real NATO, we will make NATO in Ukraine. It means that we need to increase our soldiers, our army, twice. We have 110 brigades. Russia has 220 brigades, real brigades. So they are 2 times bigger than we for today. Yes, but they're increasing mobilization and training, what they're doing now. NATO, this real brigades in Europe, what can I say? The real brigades in Europe, it's about 82. Today I spoke with senators, 82 brigades, and we have 110. Even together, we are not comparable with Russian army. Even together. So we have increased together. So if we speak security guarantees, we have to find money for a bigger army for Ukraine. And also we have to find possibility how to increase production and increase army in Europe. Who knows? Maybe it's common forces. I don't know. We are ready to speak about it.
We have a lot of questions from the floor. I just have one last question for Senator Graham. There's been discussion that China could or even should actually play a role in the Ukraine peace process, even as a guarantor of Russia's good faith or helping out with reconstruction. Is that scenario one that you can envision and that would serve U.S. interests?
Well, if China wanted to help get Russia to end this war, that would be great. How many people would like to see China help Russia end this war? I don't know if they will or not, but I've got a bill called pre-invasion sanctions that if China invades Taiwan, we're going to have sanctions from hell and tell them what comes their way. Senator Blumenthal and I had a pre-invasion sanctions bill if Russia invaded Ukraine. Nobody wants to be provocative. If we put Ukraine in NATO, it will make Putin mad. Well, I think he's mad already. So it's not about you. He wants to take the place because you got $7 trillion. Quit worrying about making him mad. Make him scared. Quit worried about offending China. Make them think twice about what they're going to do. If you invade Taiwan, we're going to crush your economy. We're going to put tariffs on you. We're going to put sanctions on you. We won't treat you as a normal country because you're not a normal country. What kind of deal am I looking for? One that not only will deter Putin, will deter Xi and anybody else. It's not working being nice to these people and being afraid of these people.
We have a question here, and then a second question over there, and then third.
Oleksiy Goncharenko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine, and my question is to American colleagues. Very striking speech of Vice President Vance right now. He was very critical towards Europe, not so much towards Russia. He almost didn't mention Russia and Russian war against Ukraine. So my question is, today is a happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Love and marriage between and alliance between America and Europe made both sides of Atlantic Ocean great. You now want to make America great again. But is it right way at the beginning to make America single again? Thank you very much.
Senator Shane.
Look, that's why I said it's important for the United States and Europe to work together on Russia. The transatlantic alliance has been one of the longest relationships of allies, certainly in the U.S. history. And I think it's important to continue that. And I think Vice President Vance missed a good opportunity to point out the past relationship and why we have been successful when we've acted together.
President Zelensky spoke. No, that's an applause line. Go for it.
It's a ridiculous thing to applaud because he said yesterday, if Ukraine is not an independent sovereign nation, we'll sanction the hell out of Russia and maybe use the military. You must have missed that.
But he needs to repeat it.
It was in an interview, so maybe today would have been the right way.
Another time to say it. With respect to President Zelensky's comment about his need for resources and Senator Sheen's comment about the need for the U.S. and Europe to work together, One very easy way to tie all that together would be to seize Russia's frozen sovereign assets.
Amen.
Or, if that's too frightening, collateralize them against a massive loan to
Amen.
Ukraine that they then backstop if Russia doesn't make good out of reparations afterwards, and get that money flowing. I think that the bankers are frightened about it, people are frightened about what it means for the currency, but I endorse Lindsay's view that this is what do they call it? A nettle that is worth grasping.
Another question.
I'm from the Baltics. In the beginning, nobody wanted Baltics in NATO. Nobody had even defense plans. We had no troops. Now we have it all. And it was legendary Senator McCain who started that campaign. So, Senator Graham, if you represent that group, you know, we have many Lithuanians, many Ukrainians, many Poles. We have Central and Eastern European coalition, 25 million American citizens of our descent. We will vote for you. Do it what you did for us. Make Ukraine NATO member.
Well, yeah. I'm okay with you being NATO. I'm just being honest with you. I think there are a few countries who are not. My idea is a little bit different. I want Putin to know if he ever does this again, you go into NATO right away. I want to take the mystery out of what happens if there's another invasion. You get sanctioned. There's a bunch of bad things come your way. We'll have troops on the ground in Ukraine. We'll have American business interests. We'll have a Ukrainian military that nobody in their right mind wants to fight. But how about this idea? If we can't get this man in NATO, like right now, can we tell Putin, if you ever do this again, he's going in NATO, like right away? Do you think he'd do it if that was clear to him? I don't think he would.
We have a question here. Trudy Rubin from... I think we can hear you. Yeah.
Труді Рубін, колумніст із Philadelphia Inquiry. Президент Зеленський говорив про потребу абсолютних гарантій безпеки, але з твітів президента та його заяв під час телефонної розмови і те, що сказав міністр Хексет, видається, що Америка розглядає тільки європейські війська там, без підтримки з боку США. Я хочу запитати президента, чи вам потрібна американська підтримка для будь-якої європейської контингенту там? І я запитую сенаторів, особливо сенатора Грема, чи ви підтримали американську підтримку для європейського контингенту? Давайте почнемо з Лінсі. У мене не така хороша англійська. Я сказав, що якщо він ще раз починає вторгнення, то вони стають членом НАТО, і це означає, що ми всі боротимемося. Окей, ми говорили про контингенти дуже багато разів, починаючи з цієї пропозиції від європейських партнерів, від Еммануеля. Ми говорили про це з Еммануелем, зі Стармером, з іншими лідерами. Я говорив про це з Еммануелем, з президентом Трампом, президентом Макроном. І я там теж був, так, це було під час нашого спільного візиту до Парижу, і ми говорили про це багато разів. По-перше, я думаю, що Сполучені Штати повинні бути разом із Європою у підтримці України. Ось чому це є політичним меседжем Путіну. Не лише в плані армії, кількості військ, це політично. Дуже важливо залишатися разом. І гарантії безпеки повинні бути від Сполучених Штатів та Європи разом. Ось чому важливо бути разом з Україною. І якщо ми розглядаємо контингенти як частину гарантій безпеки для України. Це по-перше. По-друге, як я сказав, неважливо, з якої країни ці сили. В будь-якому випадку нам потрібно 1,5 мільйони армії, якщо ми не в НАТО. Якщо ми справді хочемо зупинити після припинення вогню, якщо ми справді хочемо не боятися нової окупації чи нового вторгнення Росії, і це реальні безпекові гарантії. Бо це реальні превентивні безпекові гарантії. Це те, внаслідок чого Путін справді знатиме, що він має 1,5 мільйона армію і Україна має армію 1,5 мільйона людей. Якщо він хоче прийти і загинути, будь ласка. Тому я думаю, що це справді план для безпекових гарантій, та це не проти НАТО. Так, це дуже допоміжне. Ви не в НАТО, але я думаю, що всі захочуть після цього якщо зараз це недоступне для нас, так, мати таку велику армію в НАТО. Бо в іншому випадку ця армія буде більше, ніж будь-які інші союзи, чи щось таке. Я думаю, що це добре мати міцний союз. Це моя точка зору. І я, справді, між нами, наші військові вже зробили своє домашнє завдання. І де конкретні війська, і я не ділився цим з нашими союзниками. У нас вже є карта з кількістю та типами військ наших партнерів, де вони повинні бути. Отже, ми готові. Як я сказав, ми готові для будь-якого типу рішень, позитивних рішень. Я маю на увазі будь-якого формату зустрічей. Давайте зробимо це. Мені здається, у мене є можливість тільки для 2 запитань. Одне тут і одне від пана там. Я думаю... Так, два запитання до вас, пане президенте Зеленський. Я з Аксіос. У вас був дзвінок з президентом Трампом, і навіть він вам дав свій особистий номер телефону наприкінці дзвінка. Це було хорошим жестом, але чи ви відчули, чи ви... А ви йому свій не дали, так? Чи ви відчуваєте, що окрім цього жесту... Чи ви відчуваєте, що президент Трамп справді відданий, як в такому ж плані, як і відданий сенатор Грем Україні? Чи ви турбуєтеся, що в певний момент він може змінити курс і залишити вас самих? І друге питання. Президент Трамп вчора сказав, що будуть розмови в Саудівській Аравії наступного тижня між високопосадовцями з Росії, США та України. Чи можете роз'яснити, чи це відбудеться? Так, дякую вам. Я ніколи не бачив вашого обличчя. Я завжди чув про Аксіос, що ви завжди після телефонних дзвінків моїх з іншими лідерами, що ви знаєте, що відбулося під час телефонних дзвінків. Звідки ви берете інформацію? Звідки ви берете інформацію? Він працює з радником з питань нацбезпеки. Та я дякую. У нас була чудова розмова. Він дав номер телефону, але я думаю, що це було кумедно. Я думаю, що президент Трамп не буде проти того. Я відкрито скажу. Я сказав йому, що ця ідея з датою приїхати до вас, я сказав йому це без дати. Я сказав йому, я думаю, що це геніально. Я сказав йому. І він сказав, ви можете телефонувати в будь-який час. Я сказав, так, дякую вам дуже. Але попереднього разу ви сказали, що я можу телефонувати вам напряму в будь-який час, але не дали мені номер телефону. А він сказав, окей, так. Можете дзвонити в будь-який час, і І я сподіваюся, і ми розраховуємо, що справді президент Трамп допоможе нам, і я справді розраховую на нього, бо він президент Сполучених Штатів. Народ Сполучених Штатів, вони проголосували за нього. Він президент. І Сполучені Штати – це найбільший постачальник під час війни, я маю на увазі у порівнянні з іншими країнами. Європа також, я сказав, але Європа – це загалом континент, а США дали багато, і ось чому я розраховую на нього. Люди проголосували, і ми справді думаємо, я бачу, що так, що він сильна людина. І якщо він стане на наш бік і не буде посередині, я думаю,
він натисне на Путіна, щоб закінчити війну. Він може це зробити. Це по-перше. Тут багато меседжів навколо нього, багато інформації, так само, як і навколо саудитів. В інформаційному просторі, що це неправда, що це дезінформація. Можливо, росіяни, можливо, хтось інший, можливо, різні люди запускають цю дезінформацію. Це політичні турбуленції. Такі речі, вони руйнують єдність між нами. Це небезпечно. Наприклад, Саудівська Аравія. Я з першою леді відвідаю Саудівську Аравію.
Так, що це все заплановано, це всі візити, це дуже важливий діалог з цими людьми, що нам допомогли вже повернути дуже багато наших воїнів. У мене є питання, я не буду зараз ділитися багатьма деталями, але дуже важлива місія виконується, і ми будемо розмовляти про ці списки, про дітей, дуже важлива тема дітей, таким чином, і це дуже важка така ситуація, дуже найбільш важка, ніж те, що ми з вами вже обговорювали. Йдеться про десятки тисяч вкрадених дітей Путіним з України. Як їх повернутися? Дуже важко. Я вже багато зустрічей провів на цю тему. Це моя місія. Я не буду зустрічатися з росіянами щодо. Я не знаю, чи їм це сподобається чи ні. Я не хочу. Я не планую. Я буду зустрічатися тільки з одним русським. Це з Путіним. Тільки після того, як ми підготовимо загальний план з Трампом, щоб Путін закінчив війну. Тільки в цьому випадку, в цій мові, я буду з ним зустрічатися. Не буде ніяких інших платформ з компромісами. Дякую президенту Зеленському, дякую сенаторів за участь в нашій панелі.
Verständnis der Bundeswehr und steht dafür auch für unsere Demokratie. Diese Demokratie wurde vom US-Vizepräsidenten für ganz Europa vorhin in Frage gestellt. Er spricht von Annihilation of Democracy. Und wenn ich ihn richtig verstanden habe, vergleicht er Zustände in Teilen Europas mit denen in autoritären Regimen. Meine Damen und Herren, das ist nicht akzeptabel. Das ist nicht akzeptabel und das ist nicht das Europa und nicht die Demokratie, in der ich lebe und in der ich gerade Wahlkampf mache. Und das ist nicht die Demokratie, die ich in unserem Parlament erlebe. In dieser Demokratie hat jede Meinung eine Stimme. Sie ermöglicht es in Teilen extremistischen Parteien wie der AfD ganz normal Wahlkampf zu machen. Genau wie jede andere Partei. Das ist Demokratie. Und hätte der Vizepräsident gestern Gelegenheit gehabt, bei Ankunft den Fernseher einzuschalten, hätte er eine Spitzenkandidatin dieser Partei zur Primetime im deutschen Fernsehen gesehen. In unseren Pressekonferenzen werden übrigens auch Medien zugelassen, die russische Propaganda verbreiten, und die Vertreter der Bundesregierung müssen ihnen Rede und Antwort stehen. Ausgeschlossen wird niemand, nur weil er unser Wording nicht teilt. Demokratie bedeutet aber nicht, dass die laute Minderheit automatisch Recht hat und die Wahrheit bestimmt. Und Demokratie muss sich wehren können gegen die Extremisten, die sie zerstören wollen. Und ich sage es Ihnen, wie es ist. Ich bin froh, dankbar und stolz, in einem Europa zu leben, das diese Demokratie und unsere Art, in Freiheit zu leben, jeden Tag verteidigt gegen ihre inneren Feinde und gegen ihre äußeren. Und deswegen trete ich dem Eindruck, den Vizepräsident Vance erweckt hat, energisch entgegen, dass in unserer Demokratie Minderheiten unterdrückt oder zum Schweigen gebracht werden. Wir wissen nicht nur, gegen wen wir unser Land verteidigen, sondern auch wofür. Für die Demokratie, für die Meinungsfreiheit, für den Rechtsstaat und für die Würde jedes Einzelnen, meine Damen und Herren. Ladies and gentlemen, but unlike the Vice President, I would also like to focus my speech on the most pressing questions of European and transatlantic security. The last days have confirmed what many had speculated for months. The United States are pushing for a quick peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and they expect Europe to take the lead in securing any agreement that follows. These negotiations can be a turning point for our continent and for transatlantic relations. A historic turning point that can go into very different directions. The choices we make now will determine whether we live in peace or in crisis. They will determine our future and the future of the next generation in Europe, but also beyond. We must ensure that Ukraine is not left alone, ladies and gentlemen, because one thing remains unchanged. There will be no lasting peace in Europe without a strong and free Ukraine. There will be no sustainable rules-based order if aggression prevails. We must equally make sure that Russia does not emerge from this war as an even bigger threat than before. A fragile peace that only postpones the next war is not an option. Yesterday there was strong consensus among NATO allies that imperialist powers will only respond to deterrence and strength, be it in Europe or in the Indo-Pacific. Therefore, we must and we will negotiate from a position of strength. Three things are crucial for that. First, European and Ukrainians must play an active part in the negotiations. Only united we will be able to stand strong. Only united will we negotiate a stable and long-lasting peace. Second, Ukraine needs to negotiate from a position of strength. Germany will therefore remain the largest supporter of Ukraine on this continent. And we will continue our engagement in the near future and beyond. Third, The transatlantic alliance must not take anything off the table before the peace talks have even started. Discussions about Ukraine's NATO membership or territorial issues must take place at the negotiating table with careful consideration and in close coordination among allies. At the same time, Secretary Hegseth made it very clear that the US will remain engaged in NATO and in Europe. But the recent statements are also a strong reminder of what has been clear for many years, if we are honest. We Europeans have to contribute the lion's share to conventional deterrence and defense in Europe. We need to shape the reality we live in before it shapes us. Yesterday in NATO we agreed to develop a roadmap. That was my proposal, a roadmap to organize the burden shifting from the US to Europe in the years to come, and to avoid at the same time, by orchestrating it, that we run in capability gaps which are critical. It is time for fewer promises now and more action. That is why my French colleague Sébastien Lecornu and I established the Group of Five together with the United Kingdom, Poland and Italy at the end of last year, to chart a course for a strong Europe. We will use this format to develop the roadmap in the upcoming month and discuss it with our allies, especially with the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to make European responsibility a reality, we are taking strong measures in all important areas of defense, with regards to money, material and operational readiness. Last year, Germany committed 2% of its GDP to defense. Within just 2 years, we nearly doubled our investments in procurement. Other European nations have made similar successful efforts. Security guarantees the future for all of us and for the next generation. We have the responsibility to invest in the future. For Germany, that means further increasing our defense spending. We need substantial financial means that cannot simply be cut out of the current budget. Excluding defense spending from our national debt limit is therefore inevitable. Security is not a short-term expenditure, it is a long-term commitment. That is why I am developing a 10-year program. We need to make defense spending more predictable. That means achieving security next generation. At the European level, we need to act in a similar way. We must ensure that all countries can effectively strengthen their security. That should involve adapting the Maastricht criteria to allow nations that face tight budgetary restrictions a greater flexibility to defense investments. And it would also involve a shift towards defense in the priorities of the European Union's multi-annual financial framework, just as we heard it by Mrs. von der Leyen earlier. More cash, that's the truth, must of course translate into more capabilities. It's not about money, it's about capabilities. Germany launched a defense industry strategy to create the right political, economic and regulatory framework to quickly make our defense industry more innovative, agile and resilient. We streamlined our procurement processes, and together with industry, we are expanding our production capacities while pushing for a stronger European defense industrial base. Because one thing is certain, Europe needs a strong, more sovereign defense industry. We cannot afford excessive dependencies. This has never been clearer than today, as we see the geopolitical landscape shifting. Maintaining our technological advantage is crucial, particularly in areas such as artificial intelligence, space and quantum technology. These investments generate positive spillover effects across our entire research landscape and overall economy. We need more European solutions while maintaining strong cooperation with our transatlantic partners. We need both in order to increase our defense capacities as quickly and comprehensively as possible while building and maintaining a strong industrial base. Simply put, we Europeans must develop together, build together, buy together, deploy together, even if that involves adapting and merging certain industries and setting aside national interests in some cases. This requires better coordination of who produces what to avoid duplicating efforts. We have proved that we are capable for this. The European Sky Shield Initiative is an example. The same is true for the European long-range strike approach initiated by Germany and France. And let me mention one more example, the German-Norwegian submarine project. Soon, German crews will be able to sail on Norwegian submarines and vice versa. This is European defense integration in action. We are inviting additional nations to join, also from across the Atlantic. This will boost NATO's naval presence from the shores of the Baltic Sea across the Atlantic all the way to the Arctic, which the latter being more and more in the focus of NATO's adversaries. Projects like these are the future of procurement. They show what we can achieve when we act together and overcome national constraints. That brings me to operational readiness. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we have significantly scaled up our efforts to secure NATO's eastern flank. We increased our presence in the air, on land and at sea. As of this year, 35,000 personnel stand prepared at the highest readiness levels to defend NATO's territory if needed. In Lithuania, we are moving from a rotational to a permanent presence. Together with our allies, we have as many as 1,400 boots on the ground today as part of the multinational battle group Lithuania. We are in the midst of preparing the permanent deployment of a full combat-ready brigade. We will have roughly 5,000 personnel permanently in Lithuania in the years to come. On this note, thank you very much, President Nausėda, for being such an exemplary partner in the historic endeavor. But our commitment on the eastern flank does not and will not stop in Lithuania, also and especially after a potential peace in Ukraine. We are well aware Russia will remain a threat. We are assuming more leadership responsibility in the multinational core, Northeast, to bolster deterrence and defense in the region. This is a true example of our shared commitment to security. Ladies and gentlemen, this week has a week of decision. Next week, it will be the German voters that will make a choice. A lot is at stake in this election. I trust that the German voters will send a strong message. Germany will remain a reliable ally. Germany will continue to work towards a stronger and more secure Europe. And Germany will continue to take on more responsibility and leadership in Europe. The challenges of the coming months and years will be enormous, but so is our ability to tackle them. As long as we stand together, as long as we remain committed to our security and our values of liberal democracy, I have no doubt the future is ours to shape. Thank you.
Panelists up on stage, please, our speakers. Come on up. As I get situated, I also want to remind the audience that we are going to have some time for a Q&A at the end of this panel. But if you have a burning question on the topic we're discussing, raise your hand, get my attention. I'm hoping that we can all... You can't do it before we started talking. You can't. But we do hope to make this, please come up, Mr. President, to make this a conversation for everyone. So we are very fortunate today to have President Gitanas Nausėda, the President of the Republic of Lithuania. Thank you. We've just heard from Minister Pistorius, of course, and then we have the Secretary of the Committee on National Defense and Armed Forces, Natalia Pozirev. Thank you for being here, ma'am. Many of you may be wondering, Minister Healy, the British Defense Minister, was actually scheduled to be here. He had a scheduling issue or a transportation issue getting here, which means for me, you each get probably one or even two more questions since I don't have him up here. So any complaints about that can go right to GCHQ. When the wonderful conference organizers came to me, first approached about a panel discussing whether Europe would have to accept more security responsibility several weeks ago, it seemed almost theoretical at the time. Or at a minimum, it was a longer-term evolution of change in security in Europe. But just this week alone, it has become much more of an immediate reality. So I do want to start with that. Mr. President, Germany, as we heard from the minister, is planning to station 5,000 more soldiers, a combat brigade in Lithuania as a permanent presence by 2027. Do you see the comments that we're getting out of the United States right now, including possibly eliminating the European Defense Initiative and openly discussing pulling back the security presence here in Europe? Are you concerned that the U.S. support for NATO has shifted from a tangible, visible presence to more of a commitment that's more words than action?
I am in really a very tricky situation because I am representing the country which is probably one of the most transatlantically enthusiastic, and we all the time supported this transatlantic bond as one of the key pillars of European security. Yes, we receive a lot of signals which might be confusing for us, which might raise some questions about the future, about the perspectives. But probably right now it would be too premature to draw the conclusions and to say that we have to face new reality, we have to restructure, to regroup, to rethink ourselves and probably go another way. NATO is a very strong organization. NATO used to be a very strong organization during the very long period of Cold War. Why? Because it was determined, it was really ready to fight back, ready to retaliate, and this created certain balance between the former Soviet Union and NATO. I think we should create strong NATO organization, but first of all, we have to deliver on our promises. And if we are talking that we have to take more responsibilities, I am thinking about the summit of NATO in Wales. There was a promise to invest 2% of our GDP 11 years ago. What happened in Vilnius? Vilnius summit, we were hosting in Vilnius NATO summit in 2023. There was the promise to spend on defense, yes, again 2%, but the 2% as a floor of investment. And now we are approaching The Hague, we are talking about 3% spending. But the situation is totally different. Average spending of NATO countries is 1.9% of GDP. Despite long discussions, despite nice plans, we are still below threshold of 2%. In this situation, I think we have to be honest to ourselves and to do much more. And I'm talking not only about defense spending, but I am talking about support to Ukraine and other issues. My country is ready to do what is needed, and recently we have announced that the defense spending in 2026, 2030 should reach the level of 5 to 6% of GDP. This is really pretty high figure, and we will be putting a lot of efforts in order to achieve this level. Another important element of Eastern flank countries, and especially Baltic countries, close cooperation with our friends. And I really have to say that Mr. Boris Pistorius, the Minister of Defense of Germany, is a person who was very emotionally engaged into this project. And probably you, dear Minister, were the person who was truly believing to the success of this project from the very beginning. And now this is a matter of our honor to do the rest, to deliver on our promises, to implement all the measures which are necessary for full accommodation, training of a German brigade, and we are sure that we will be able to deliver. I see the defense minister of Lithuania, and she agrees with me. So I think this is good guarantee that we will proceed. But coming back to your question, I think we have to take more responsibility. We have to deliver more. We have to require from ourselves much more than we did in the past. And we should use all the possibilities not to lose the transatlantic bond. I still strongly believe in the transatlantic bond, but of course we have to closely work with our partners, United States, and this is our duty to do.
It's generally a good idea to agree with the president for job security, just so you know. Smart. Because the president brought up money, Mr. Minister, I want to ask you about that. I believe Germany reported to NATO spending about 90.6 billion euros in defense spending in 2024, but about 20 billion of that was from the special fund. That met the 2% threshold for Germany. But if I understand it correctly, the special fund may not be around for much longer. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a journalist. Math is not my strong suit, clearly. But is it even possible, now that this discussion of 5%, I mean, that's becoming more mainstream, or at a minimum 3%. Is it even possible for Germany to meet that?
From my perspective, it's not the question whether it is possible or not or achievable. It has to be. There's no doubt about not a question of whether, but of when and how quickly. Because, I mean, we can discuss about 5%. I don't care. Sorry to say that, because my primarily focus is to achieve the NATO capability requirements which we have to face in summer. And the head of states will then conclude. This is the challenge we have to fulfill, and to do that in between the years we get for that. And that might cost in 1 year 100 billion in Germany, and the next year 120, and the next 90. I don't care. We have to make it possible. We have to make it happen. And therefore, I'm quite convinced, and I mentioned it earlier, we have to understand, we need to understand in Europe and in Germany too, that security is absolutely crucial. Without security, anything else is nothing. If we don't acknowledge that investments in security is investment in our future before we can discuss anything else, then we make a severe mistake for our children and grandchildren. And therefore, and I know very well it is a challenge for every society, to be honest. I mean, we are now spending, you named the number, in 2028 the special fund will be spent totally. Then we go back, if nothing happens, to 52, 53 billion euros a year, which means something about 1.3 or something like that. So the next government coming in office after the elections, Sunday 23rd, anytime, the first challenge it will have to face is to solve that issue. How do we manage the budget for 28 and follows? Because we need at least 85 to 90 billion euros in 28 for achieving 2%. To achieve 3% would mean 120 billion, 130 billion, which would mean, compared with today, with a regular budget of my ministry, more than 70 billion euros more. So it has to come from anywhere. And I don't believe it is possible to cut that out of the regular budget. Social welfare, healthy system, infrastructure. It is impossible. Then we will have a division of our societies, and the only ones who will benefit of that will be the far right and populist parties. And that will damage our democracies. And therefore it is so crucial to acknowledge that finally we have to do more as quickly as possible.
Madame, I want to ask you about the French military and support for Ukraine. They've already been training Ukrainian troops for some time now. We heard from the U.S. Defense Secretary this week saying that he believes if peacekeepers go to Ukraine if there is some sort of a peace deal or a ceasefire, they should not be under NATO and they should not have Article 5 protection. Do you believe that France should send peacekeepers if there is an agreement, a peace agreement, and should they have Article 5 protections?
Yes, it's working. Thank you. First, I wanted to thank Minister Pistorius for his words, because if we have to compare the freedom of speech in Europe, I think it's better than in Russia. Much better. So coming to the question, yes, it's again a matter of political will. And we often refer to the coalition of the willing and the capable, and this is part of the European Constitution Treaty. So, of course, the threat is not perceived the same way by different countries, but I think we more or less all agree that Russia is a long-lasting threat. It's even existential to some countries, like the Baltic countries. I think Russia has a plan. It will start by Moldova or Georgia, but it can, penetrate even Europe. So we are really in danger, and the manipulation of information is part of the risk we have to face, because it can jeopardize our democracies. We have seen it in Romania recently. So coming back to what the coalition of willing and capable could do, because I don't see France going on its own for sure, so we need to have partners, and there are partners I know that are well prepared. We have within the Weimar Triangle, plus, I would say, and plus the UK, plus other partners. Of course, we should get some insurances, guarantees that there's a good, say, air cover, air transportation facilities. There are some solutions to that I'm not able to discuss now, but you cannot send troops, even if our military are completely professional militaries, and they will do what they are tasked for. But of course, it's not that easy. So the thing is that because of the threat, we have to give security guarantees to Ukraine. And if there's a way that European can make it on a way or another, securing the border, providing more equipment, of course, we shall consider it, and we have certainly, on the other hand, to ramp up our industrial capabilities. This is what we are doing in France, trying to produce more munitions, missiles, and so on. On the third point is really we have to invest in R&D, because there will be a huge transformation of the combat on the ground. I think we'll use more AI, as it was said, quantum computing, to speed up the process, so that we can have this kind of collaborative combat, using drones and everything, and it will need a lot of investment in these technologies. And this is where we have to prepare for the future. We have really to take our responsibility, because it's for the next generation. We have to prepare for the skills. It's not only about, producing equipment. We need to have the competencies, the skills. We need to have the engineers. We have to have the technicians. They should not go abroad to be able to work on AI and so on. So this was part of also your remarks. So maybe I will stop there.
Great. I promised I would take audience questions if you have something that's burning. Here, grab my mic. I feel like Oprah. I'm walking into the crowd.
Thank you very much. Alexei Goncharenko, member of the Parliament of Ukraine. My question is, striking speech of Vice President Vance. He was very critical towards Europe, not so critical towards Russia. And he didn't mention Russia and Russian war against Ukraine almost at all. And So my question is, yesterday I heard from Pete Hegseth, new Secretary of Defense, that Uncle Sam will never be Uncle Sucker. And I completely agree, but also Uncle Sam should never be Uncle Shame, So that is important. And my question is, what will be done by Europe in order in 1 year not to listen to speech like this? Thank you.
Maybe you should address that question to another place. I don't know. I mean, what should I do? I mean, we admit all the time that the critics are right, that we have to do more and that we did too little in the years before. Much too little, to be honest. 2% is not enough, everybody knows it, and up to date, the President mentioned it earlier, not even all countries in NATO members in Europe have already achieved the 2%. And it's a challenge, as I mentioned too. So we don't disagree. And I even, when I talked to Pete Hegseth yesterday, I said to him, I fully agree that you will shift your focus more from Europe to the Indo-Pacific. And together we need to shift more focus, more attention to the Arctic too at the same time. So to expect from European side that the US will engage as much as in the past, in the future too, while at the same time doing more in Indo-Pacific and Arctic would be naive. And we have to take that responsibility. So therefore, acting is better than words in that place. If we do that, I don't know what's happened. And I don't know whether we will have to listen to a speech like that again. But anyway, it's better to have a hot heart and a cool head than the other way around.
Can I ask you, just since you mentioned that you were with Secretary Hegseth yesterday, this week, what did you think when he said that the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement?
Well, it's no secret what I think about that. I emphasized it already several times. I'm not the world's most important and famous deal maker. But if I were, I would know that I don't take any essential point of negotiations off the table before the negotiations begin. I would never do that. And
Did it damage Ukraine's standing? to all?
I don't know whether it damaged anything or not, but it makes it much more complicated and difficult. And afterwards, I heard some news from Washington, Wall Street Journal, and others that might be the final position. So what we experience in the moment is like we have in German the nice word like cacophony, multiple voices all over the world, and maybe we should step back a little bit and wait until all the noises get lower.
Please, sir.
I would like to comment a bit on you mentioned in your initial speech about a quick deal or a quick peace in Ukraine, and is closely related to your question. I think this is very dangerous idea to achieve the quick peace in Ukraine, and I have discussed this issue today with the President Zelensky. Ukraine will never take such quick peace at any cost. And we are talking about territorial sovereignty and integrity of the country, which is suffering, which is, of course, fighting back, and which is trying to survive. And in this situation, we have to put Ukraine in the position of strength. Right now, Russia feels to be on the stronger side and tries to dictate the conditions. In this situation, we have to negotiate tough, and we have to be at the table of negotiations, because a lot was said about the role of Europe before the war end and after the war end, and the responsibilities of Europe are very high and very important. So without Europe, I cannot imagine any negotiation process. And of course, it would be really misunderstanding if the negotiations will take place without Ukraine itself, because Ukraine is fighting, and Ukraine is really putting a lot of efforts to withstand this enormous pressure of Russian Federation, and we have to be very strongly on the side of Ukraine. So our deliveries are not only the deliveries to ourselves, our responsibilities, our homework to do, but we have to deliver on our promises to Ukraine. And unfortunately, I have to say, and I have to admit that not in all cases we are able to deliver. We heard so many declarations during the last 3 years, and if we calculate closely what those declarations, which declarations were fulfilled, the result is not very encouraging, unfortunately. My country, Nordic countries, Germany, other countries, they are strong enough to deliver and keep the promises. This is very important, especially in this stage of the war.
Yes, very quickly. Some American fellow congressmen said that Donald Trump would strike a strong deal. So just let it be. Let's hope it will be a strong deal, and that it will imply that the Europeans will be involved in the negotiation along with the Ukrainians, of course.
I do want to take a question from one of our Munich young leaders.
Hi, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to very much thank you, Minister, for what you said on European democracy at the beginning of your speech. I think you captured the feeling of many people in the room, so I just wanted to thank you for this. My question is My question is the following. It's on security guarantees, because we discussed about increasing the responsibilities of Europe in defense in the midterm, but this question may come earlier. So my question is the following. How concretely can European countries play a strong role into providing such guarantees that would ensure a lasting peace in Ukraine and prevent further aggression by Russia? And as a sub-question, what could be, would be, should be the role of the US in this respect, also in light of the recent statements we've heard, and you referred to it, by Pete Hegseth in the past few days?
I would like, if you don't mind, to put that in the order of what is coming up. I mean, the first step was a phone call between President Trump and President Putin Wednesday at lunchtime, I think. Nothing happened since then, as far as I'm informed, except correcting the first decision that Ukraine is will now be at the table anyway. It's a good correction of what they said before. But we have to wait what's going to happen now, because if European countries, I don't want to name it, 5 or 7 or European Union or whatever, but if no European participation is guaranteed and is achieved in that process of negotiations, it's hard to imagine that Europe will then afterwards have the responsibility to achieve the guarantees. I mean, this is quite crazy. So it is about negotiating together with Ukraine, Russia, and the US, of course. And Pete Hegseth said yesterday there will be no US boots on the ground in Ukraine, and the European allies has to achieve that on their own. And I said to him quite frankly and publicly that we have to acknowledge and realize that we have a gap of deterrence capabilities in the among the European NATO members. That means without the US deterrence capabilities, we won't be able to achieve that security guarantees in Ukraine, at least for the next years to come, not alone. So that's the same challenge we have with NATO and doing less by the Americans in the years to come. In both cases, we need a roadmap. We need a concept which we work on together, hand in hand, and which we go alongside, step by step together. Then everything is thinkable for the future, but not for the short-term future.
Yes, I would like to come back to the fact that I said earlier that Putin has a plan. His plan is to demilitarize Ukraine, to make it neutral, to get rid of Zelensky, to put a man in place, and not to allow any NATO, of course, but any European troops in Ukraine. So we are far from, a negotiation that can deliver what we think it could be. But, of course, we are at this defining moment of, thinking about a possible resolution. But we are far, far from it.
Therefore, I'm so, cautious to speculate about what we might do in a couple of years. I don't take part in those discussions, at least not publicly.
We only have about 2 minutes left, and I have 12 pages of questions left.
Okay,
so
let's succeed.
I'm going to, yes.
It's
unless
my
we have
fault.
3 more hours, I'm going to do a quick lightning round with all of you. First, the speech by Vice President J.D. Vance today. Yes or no? Did you expect that he would come up here and criticize Europe for the need for more free speech and democracy? Madame, I'll start with you.
Very quickly. I thought he would speak at least about Ukraine and Russia. I could not believe he would speak about the freedom of speech in Europe and point out, Germany and UK. Of course, he would not mention France because it's better not to mention France. But it's not my... But no, for me, it was unexpected.
Mr. Minister, I think we heard your feelings, but
yes, I'm fine. Yeah. I exceeded my speech, so please, Mr. President.
Mr. President, did you expect to hear that from the Vice President today?
First of all, I would like to expect that we come to the table, we discuss all the issues honestly, frankly, as our friends do. And even probably right now it does not look like this, but I remember 2019, London, summit of NATO. The conversations were not very polite at that time also, between Donald Trump, between former Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel. But at the end of the day, we managed to take very important decisions in London and afterwards. So let me hope that we still have the potential to cooperate together, because everything is at stake. And right now we don't have the right to make the mistakes. And one of the cruelest mistakes would be just to abolish our transatlantic bond with United States. I know that I am unpopular here, talking about strong transatlantic bond. But believe me, it's very important for the Baltic states, which currently host 1,000 American soldiers battalion on the persistent basis. We are hosting them beside German soldiers. So we rely heavily on our friends, all our friends, not trying to emphasize one of them.
You are not unpopular at all with that statement, not at all.
No one's ever going to say you're unpopular when you're on stage, Okay, we're totally out of time, but I'm going to ask really a yes or no question for all of you. President Trump has talked about having closer relations with Vladimir Putin. Yes or no, does that concern you going forward? Just a yes or no?
Well, it's a concern, for sure. And it's the first step to normalization of Putin that has happened, already taken place.
I mean, the experience we made in Europe with Vladimir Putin is quite clear. We could never trust him, and we won't be ever able to trust him. So we have to be very careful what we do. And still, it's of course better to talk and to negotiate than to do not.
I fully agree with Minister, because you cannot trust Vladimir Putin. We have so long experience in communicating having the relations with Russian Federation, and you cannot trust. But switching back to your question, I think this is very important to understand that, yes, as a first stage, these discussions are okay, but in the second stage, we need the involvement of Europe, involvement of Ukraine, most importantly. Ukraine is a critical part of these negotiations, because otherwise I cannot understand what is going on.
Thank you all so much. We have to leave it there. It was a fascinating discussion. Thank you to the Munich Security Conference as well.
Hello. Hi there. Prime Minister from Norway. Very nice. Good to see you. Very nice to meet you. I'm a big fan of your country. I know you've been there. Many times.
many times.
Rafa. Jonas is my first. Rafa. My pleasure. Yes. Yeah. Yes, I am. I appreciate I'm just out of breath because my plan is just 2 hours late to be here. It's just arrived. That it is. Yeah. So I always, when I see members of Congress and reps officers, I always bring the maps. Because it's not obvious that you see that we are shows from the red. So, we pride ourselves in saying we are eyes and ears and NATO in North. And so many years ago
nothing. I was just making sure I was good here. Oh.
why she's standing on something. I thought she was sitting in my truck. I can't get off my fucking truck. I didn't curse.
¿Eres agricultor? Tenemos una buena noticia para ti. Ahora con la subvención del kit digital tienes gratis un sistema de riego inteligente que puedes controlar con el móvil.
C'è tutta una fila chiusa tranne 2 metri.